Anna Repkina was born in 1990 in Moscow, Russia. In 2016, after getting out of a 7-year relationship, she went on a dating website and met a man named William Hargrove, who lived in Olsen, Oregon. The relationship quickly blossomed, and before long, she was making plans to come to the United States to meet him. During the holidays of that year, she spent a total of 10 days with William, and at the end of the trip, he asked her to marry him. She agreed, but had to return to Russia to make plans to permanently move to the United States. 3 months later, in March of 2017, she left her life in Russia and returned to Oregon with the plans to settle down and get married. However, unbeknownst to her, the man she was about to marry wasn't all he was cracked up to be. William, who worked as a mechanic at a local car dealership, was having an affair with his married landlady, Michelle Chavez, who was married to a professor who taught at Oregon State University. William lived in their home, along with the couple's 2 children. The affair had been going on the entire time he was wooing Anna, and he had no plans to stop it. William and Michelle had met while she was working as a bouncer at a bar, and before long, she offered to rent him a room at her home. Sadly, because of the affair, Anna would never get married. William would become the prime suspect in a murder case, and I kid you not when I say that somehow time travel became part of this case. Anna and William were supposed to get married on March 23, 2017, but William called it off and told her it was because the officiant couldn't show up on that day. However, he told Michelle a different story. He said he wasn't in love with Anna and was going to send her back to Russia. In the meanwhile, Michelle had forced William to move out of her home and into another place with Anna because she didn't like her being around. She also broke things off with her husband in order to be with William. However, 3 weeks later, Anna was still there and Michelle was pissed. So she gave him an ultimatum: either get rid of Anna or she was done. On April 16, 2017, a groundskeeper near Olsen, Oregon, came upon Anna's body. She had sadly been shot to death. The trash that lay on the ground beside her was just as shocking. We're talking candy wrappers, fast food bags with a receipt from KFC, and cigarette cartons. She had basically flown 5,000 miles to be with who she thought was the love of her life, only to be thrown away like a piece of trash. The KFC receipt that was found was dated April 14th, 2 days before Anna's body was discovered. Investigators were able to trace the receipt right back to William. They then discovered that after she was dead, he withdrew $800 from her bank account. He then used the money to buy candy and cigars and pay for his car insurance. He also bought some Star Wars Legos. Investigators knew they had their prime suspect, but they needed to know why he murdered Anna. Police tracked down Kevin Thomas, a friend of William's, who had eaten with him that day at KFC. He told investigators about the love triangle that had turned sour. He also said that William borrowed a shotgun from him that day and never returned it, the exact type of weapon that was used to murder Anna. Based on the testimony by Kevin, investigators were able to piece together a timeline of events. They determined that on the day Anna's body was found, William took her into the woods and shot her to death with the shotgun he borrowed from Kevin. He then called Michelle, and the two met and had sex a few miles away. William, clearly feeling guilty about his actions, began researching time travel on the internet. While researching, he stumbled upon a spell that he believed might allow him to travel back in time. He even saved screenshots of the web pages. He was also communicating with people through the WhatsApp, asking them for help to travel back in time to correct a horrible mistake that was made. He also offered his soul to strangers in exchange for information on time travel. On April 19, 2017, William was arrested and charged with Anna's murder. They had found the murder weapon in his vehicle and retrieved cell phone data that put him at the crime scene. However, when he was brought in for questioning, he downplayed their relationship and said he barely knew her and they had only been on 2 dates. When asked about his KFC meal with Kevin, he said he threw the bag away outside a general store. When investigators pointed out that the bag was found at the crime scene, William quickly lawyered up. He and his attorney then began putting the blame on Michelle, and his defense team would continue with that allegation throughout the trial. On the surface, it seemed that Michelle was also a victim of William's lies and deceit, but she had allegedly made some very questionable comments. When she gave William the ultimatum, she told him to, and I quote, "fix this and get rid of her." She also said if Anna was, and I quote, "not gone by Thursday, I'm building a snowman." Michelle would later testify that building a snowman was a family joke about killing someone and hiding their body inside a snowman somewhere cold enough that it would never melt. While she insisted it was just a joke, William's attorney used that as part of their defense, claiming that it was a clear threat to kill Anna. Since the defense was trying to pin the murder on Michelle, the prosecutor showed a message that William sent Michelle that read, "I will have this solved permanently." In November 2019, William was convicted of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. As for Michelle, no charges have ever been brought against her. After all was said and done, Anna's remains were cremated and shipped back to her family in Russia. In April of 2008, 18-year-old Queena Phu was living in Bloomingdale, Florida, with her mother, Vanna Nguyen. Queena was a senior in high school working at the clothing store Abercrombie & Fitch. She was described as a very happy and energetic individual. Toward the end of April, she was making plans to graduate and getting ready for her senior prom. That is, until a horrible tragedy changed her life forever. On April 24, 2008, after Queena got off work, she went to the Bloomingdale Regional Public Library in Brandon, Florida, to return some books. Since the library was already closed, she was just going to drop them off. However, when she pulled up, she noticed a man sitting on the bench nearby and found that rather strange. She was on the phone with her friend Rachel and told her about the man and asked if she would stay on the phone while she dropped off the books. Queena got out of her car and opened the rear door where the books were. Then suddenly, Rachel heard a terrifying scream and the call ended. When Rachel tried to call her back, there was no answer. She had a friend who lived nearby, and she called and asked them to run over and check on her. She also called Queena's mother, Vanna, and informed her of the situation. When the other friend arrived about 30 minutes later, they found Queena's car still running with the door open. They noticed blood on the ground, along with her cell phone, which was now broken into pieces. At that point, the police were called. When they arrived and began searching the area, they discovered Queena's badly beaten body behind the library, but thankfully she was still alive. She was quickly airlifted to a nearby hospital in very critical condition. She then fell into a coma, but regained consciousness the following day. Surprisingly, she remembered what happened, and one of the first things she asked was, did they find him? This moment of joy quickly faded as the swelling in her brain worsened, causing her to have a seizure. Doctors quickly performed emergency brain surgery to reduce the swelling and then placed her into a medically induced coma. In the meanwhile, investigators discovered a utensil from the fast food restaurant Wendy's and took it for evidence. They also learned that not only had Queena been attacked, but she was also sexually assaulted. It wasn't long before the suspect was identified as 16-year-old Kendrick Morris, a sophomore in high school. As they dug into Morris's past, they learned he had been caught torturing animals, which is typically a psychopathic trait. 3 weeks after the attack, Queena came out of the coma. Unfortunately, she was now in a permanent vegetative state that left her blind and no longer able to walk or speak. However, she still has that beautiful smile she was always known for. She is now in the permanent care of her family and requires around-the-clock care. While her recovery has been difficult, she has been able to take a few steps with assistance and make a few sounds. She even got to have the experience of her prom that she sadly missed. Now back to the piece of shit who destroyed her life. It turns out he had also attacked and sexually assaulted a daycare worker. Here's a clip of the daycare worker's testimony.
Only evidence that they're going to have in this case is the DNA. There's not going to be anything that corroborates it.
I reached back to close the door. I saw this person came up. He had a ski mask on and some gloves. His left hand caught the door and his right hand had a knife.
For both crimes, he was sentenced to 65 years in prison. A law was then enacted that allowed him to request a resentencing in 2017. In an amazing turn of events, he was given life in prison without the possibility of parole, and in my opinion, the sentence he should have originally received. Rachel Hannah Morin was born to parents Patty and Ronald on May 20th, 1986, in Dover, New Hampshire. In 2023, 37-year-old Rachel was the mother of 5 children living in Baltimore, Maryland. She was also dating a man by the name of Richard Tobin. Family and friends described her as a very devoted mother who was the life of the party and had a great sense of humor. She loved fashion, fitness, and traveling to such places as Miami and Vegas. On Saturday, August 5th, 2023, Rachel went for a walk on the Ma and Pa Trail in Harford County, Maryland. The trail follows the old Maryland and Pennsylvania Railroad and is typically known as a safe location with frequent visitors. After leaving her home that day, she was never seen alive again. Later that day, when she failed to return home, Richard went out looking for her and discovered her car in a parking lot at the entrance to the trail. At 11:20 p.m., he called police and reported her missing. The following day, a search party was formed and set out on the trail looking for her. At 1:07 p.m., a Native American tracker by the name of Michael Gazbrzeski and his stepdaughter Cecilia, who was friends with Rachel and had joined in on the search, found her naked body in a culvert off the trail. She had sadly been sexually assaulted and beaten to death. The injuries to her head were so severe, she was almost unrecognizable. Richard was immediately looked at as a person of interest, not only because he was the one who found her car, but because he had been arrested 14 times since 2014 on charges including drug dealing, assault, disorderly conduct, and resisting arrest. People on social media also began pointing fingers at him. However, at the time of Rachel's murder, he had been clean for 15 months and was getting his life in order. He also took to social media to declare his innocence. Within a couple of weeks, the DNA from the crime scene ruled him out. The DNA was then uploaded to CODIS and matched to a wanted suspect in a case from California. Unfortunately, they didn't know the suspect in that case either, and the match was only between the DNA retrieved from both crime scenes. The case in California occurred in March 2023, when the suspect entered a home in Los Angeles and assaulted a 9-year-old girl and her mother. The man was captured on the front door security camera, but unfortunately, you couldn't see his face. The following month after Rachel's murder in September of 2023, investigators enlisted the help of Othram. After generating a DNA profile, their genealogy team got to work. In the meanwhile, investigators released a composite sketch of the suspect, hoping someone might recognize him. More than 1,000 tips across 7 states came in, but they were still unable to identify him. Finally, genealogists were able to provide investigators with some new investigative leads, and in early May 2024, the suspect was identified as 23-year-old Victor Antonio Martinez Hernandez. He had crossed into the country illegally in February 2023 after fleeing El Salvador, where he was also wanted for murder. Now that they had a name, they just needed to find him. On June 14, 2024, he was arrested and charged with first-degree murder after he was found sitting in a bar in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He is currently in jail in Tulsa, awaiting extradition back to Maryland. Terrence Wayne Zwicker, who went by Trey, was born on September 3, 1996, to parents Amanda McFarland and Terry Zwicker. In 2011, 14-year-old Trey was staying with his mother in Louisville, Kentucky. His mother, Amanda, was married to a convicted felon by the name of Joshua Gowker. Josh Young, his son from another woman, also lived with them. At the time, Trey was a freshman honor roll student at Seneca High School and appeared to have everything going for him until his life was tragically cut short. On May 11, 2011, students at Liberty High School were at the creek behind the school and shockingly found Trey's body. He had sadly been beaten to death. This location was within walking distance from his mother's home. Suspicions immediately began swirling around his new stepfamily. His stepbrother, Josh Young, was brought in for questioning but denied involvement, saying he and his father liked Trey and would have never done that. Young had even been a pallbearer at Trey's funeral. Strangely, though, he never showed any emotions about his stepbrother's murder. Young's own father, Gowker, told investigators he felt his son was responsible. Plus, Gowker was ruled out after providing an alibi. He was with Amanda and was seen on surveillance footage buying cigarettes from a gas station. Investigators eventually felt they had enough evidence and arrested 15-year-old Young in early 2012 and charged him with the murder. In a shocking twist, 39-year-old Gowker came forward and confessed to Trey's murder during his son's trial. He was then brought in to testify and said he took Trey behind Liberty High School to confront him for allegedly stealing a lighter and a plate of food. He then beat him to death with a pipe. He said the main reason for the murder was because Amanda was pregnant by him but had the child aborted. Because of Gowker's confession, a jury found Young not guilty, and the judge dismissed all charges. Trey's family was extremely upset and felt that he got away with murder. Meanwhile, Gowker entered a guilty plea and was sentenced to life in prison. Then, in 2014, he tried to change his story and put the blame back on his son, saying he only pleaded guilty to spare him from prison. He then tried to have his conviction tossed out, but a judge rejected that. Interestingly, there is evidence that points to Young being the actual murderer. He was involved in a relationship with his cousin, who lived next door to them. She said that around 1:30 a.m. on the night in question, Young showed up and said he murdered Trey. He then asked her to drive him somewhere to get rid of his blood-stained clothes and the baseball bat that he used. To this day, that bat has never been recovered. There's also the fact that Gowker provided incorrect details about the murder, such as using a pipe versus a bat. He also slipped up while on the stand and said "we" when talking about the crime. In 2014, Young appeared on the Dr. Phil show along with Trey's father. During the show, he begged Young to tell them the truth, but he continued insisting he had nothing to do with the murder. Dr. Phil then called Gowker at the Kentucky State Penitentiary. During that call, Gowker once again put the blame on his son. Young's life would only go downhill from there, from multiple arrests for assault, drug, and gun charges. Then, in 2018, this case would take another shocking turn when Young wrote a confession letter while incarcerated at Grayson County Detention Center. In the letter, he took blame for the murder and said his father was innocent. He then told a new version of events. He said that on the night in question, he met Trey behind the school to smoke some marijuana. He claims Trey was being a smartass, which upset him, so he began hitting him with his baseball bat. He said he had the bat because he and Trey would often vandalize cars and people's windows. He said his hate for him began when they got pulled over one time and Trey told on him for having weed. He then confirmed his cousin was telling the truth about him going to her house that night to get rid of the bat and his clothes. Together, they went to an apartment complex and threw the items in a dumpster. He said that after the murder, he and his father took a vacation to Tennessee and then Alabama. While on that trip, he began confessing to that murder, but Gowker stopped him, saying he would need to pass a polygraph and didn't want to know the details. Could it be possible he's just saying all this because he is trying to get his father out of jail and doesn't believe he can be retried due to double jeopardy? After Trey's murder, Young got a teardrop tattoo and later admitted that it was for Trey. He has also never shown any remorse for the crime and was quoted as saying, "Like, I don't even like the dude, I don't care. I mean, bad shit happened to better people. You know what I'm saying?" While this case is considered solved, many now wonder if the wrong person is behind bars. Do y'all think they both belong there because of how they destroyed Trey's family? Let me know what y'all think in the comments below. Ashley Ann Olsen was born in 1980 to parents Walter and Paula and grew up in Summer Haven, Florida. She was described as a beautiful, creative young woman with a happy, exuberant, generous soul. In 2014, after the divorce from her husband, 35-year-old Ashley moved to Florence, Italy to be near her father and to attend the Florence art school Bianca Capella. She ended up in a studio apartment in the Oltrano neighborhood. She was very excited about her new life and began dating a Florentine artist by the name of Federico Fiorentini. On January 8, 2016, Ashley went to the Monte Carlo nightclub and after leaving was never seen alive again. The following day, Federico went to her apartment after being unable to get in touch with her. Since he didn't have a key to get in, he contacted the landlord, who agreed to let him inside. That's when he tragically found Ashley strangled to death. When investigators arrived, they collected a cigarette butt and a used condom from her bathroom. Based on the DNA found under her fingernails, it appeared she had tried to fight off her attacker. Missing from her apartment was her cell phone and some of her personal belongings. Investigators then checked security footage from the nightclub and saw her leaving with a Senegalese national who was in the country illegally. The man with the last name of Dial was brought in for questioning and had his DNA tested against the DNA found under her fingernails, on the cigarette, and from the condom, and it was a match. He was then subsequently arrested and charged with her murder. He said that the two of them were doing cocaine and drinking, and after arriving back at her apartment, they got into a physical altercation after engaging in consensual sex. However, he claimed that when he left, she was still alive. Her family didn't believe the sexual encounter was consensual because Ashley had received treatment days earlier for a severe bladder infection and was taking antibiotics. Plus, the autopsy showed that not only had she been strangled to death, but he had fractured her skull in 2 different places. Dial claimed that after sex, Ashley wanted him to leave and began pushing him to the door. He said when she turned her back to him, he punched her in the back of the head. At that point, he claims they got into a shoving match and that he picked her up by the neck and put her on the bed, alive and moaning in pain. After that, he left her apartment. However, he never admitted to strangling her, but the autopsy showed she had been strangled with some type of rope or cord. Investigators were also surprised to find that he came back to her apartment for a second time. Regardless, Dial was convicted of murder and sentenced to 30 years in prison.